Hey guys, welcome back. So we're working on the GT350 and I'm going to show you some brackets we just built, and then we're going to do we're going to get to this, which is a surge tank for the car. So this front cross member used to have bolts that attached it to the frame, but we chopped all that off a while back. So we needed to replace it, and here's what we did. It's actually simple, but it worked out nice. We ended up using some rivets to attach these, so it turned out fairly clean. It's very rigid, like this is super, works great. And we sat here and adjusted the height, so when you shut the hood, all the body lines mostly line up. Just getting it close for now. It's not, that'll get final adjusted basically later. But we got our brackets built, which is cool. Our intercoolers are roughly where they're gonna go. You can see here the tire clearance. We have some, not a bunch, but it's kind of easier to see over here. Anyway, that's all right. So let's jump to the fuel system. So this car is going to be, 16 to 1800 horsepower probably, something like that. So we wanted to make sure we had enough fuel system. So we ended up purchasing this. It's from Radium, pretty nice. Man, this thing looks like $1 million. I'm actually looking at it and I'm like, what? This is like, totally looks like it's worth what I paid for it. Or what the customer paid for it, technically. But yeah, looks like it's all billet. We're about to take it apart. So we got a pair of these. These are the BKS 1000. So this is a brushless DC fuel pump. It's actually the same one they put in a Veyron, but we're going to put two of them. So this was designed for it. So these motors, because they're brushless DC, they actually have 4 wires per motor. You can see they're all labeled, color and pump numbers. Very nice. All these are labeled. So for those of you that aren't sure, if you've never seen this or haven't used one, these are kind of cool. So on a regular car, like this Mustang, for example, if you put it on a racetrack and you go through some tight turns or whatever, or launch the car, there's certain conditions where the fuel like sloshes in the gas tank, and even though you're not empty, it'll suck up air and you can lose fuel pressure. So what this does is kind of like a capacitor, sort of. It can store up some fuel. So what you do is you put some, you still have to have a fuel pump in the gas tank. That's called a lift pump. And it'll have a supply and I think overflow. You use these two. I know that says return, but you use these two. So your lift pump, which is in the gas tank, pumps fuel into this, and this whole thing fills up with fuel, and when it's full, it hits the overflow and this shoots back to the gas tank. So that way this thing has a continuous supply of fuel, and if you ever go into a tight turn, well, you'll stop supplying fuel to this, but this whole can is full of fuel. Inside the can, we're going to have our fuel pumps mounted, and the pickup will be really low, and presumably it's like well baffled and all that. So that way, even if you get like a momentary, second or 2 or 3 of sucking air, this thing will still be full of fuel. And this has a big one right here. This supplies fuel to the motor, and that's the return. So you basically circulate fuel back and forth here, and then this is what fills the tank using the lift pump, which is kind of cool. Let's call it a surge tank. So anyway, it looks sweet. We're about to put this thing together. Let's get to it. Okay, so we got the assembly going together. So this is like a sensor. So normally this thing's totally full of fuel, so this is like the top and it'll float. But if it ever starts to drop, this is just a hall sensor and it'll trip whenever it drops here. So got that hooked up. It also has a light. So that's the light wires. These are the sensor wires. I tested it to make sure it works. It does. Pretty clean how they do it. Just got to put some heat shrink here, but it came with that. I gotta say, this is some of the highest. This is for sure probably the best engineered product I've ever purchased in the aftermarket. Man, they really did a good job on this. It's impressive. So we got one pump in. We're about to do the other. I thought I'd film this part just to show you. So it's kind of clever. This piece here, I know it's already put together, but essentially you drop this is just a hose barb, and you slide this piece over the hose barb, put in these 2 split rings, and then when it pulls up, it catches on the barb. Then you drop in an O-ring and pull this up against the O-ring, and there's some bolts. You can see it on this one. You tighten those bolts, and that's how it creates the seal. So this will actually rotate. It's snug, but it rotates. There's an O-ring seal. The O-ring is getting sealed against that hose barb. Pretty cool. And then, of course, you can see here, these, well, maybe you can see, yeah, these actually thread into the hanger. So it's like a rigid setup. There's no actual rubber hose in here. And then this piece is the support. So when you put it all together, these are not just floating, they're held by a steel bracket. The only tiny strike I can give against Radium, this part was damaged. It's not going to matter, but like right there, you can see that little spot weld or fusion weld or whatever that is. That was broke out of the box, but it's not going to matter. This is going to work fine. It's a solid here, so. But that is a little miss on their part. But that's minor. This stuff's pretty well done. So anyway, thought I'd show you that. Here you can see those 4 wires. We just put some oil. I've got to keep a little thing of oil. So we lubed the O-ring. We're about to thread this one in, snug it up. And then we got to deal with the wiring. So, and put this little hanger piece on. You can see the little pieces in here that we'll hook the wires up to. So we're about to do that. Here's that assembly after putting the brackets in. Man, this looks super nice considering how little space this takes up, how clean the install is with no hoses. It's just a rigid, well, mostly rigid setup. I really like that. Like I said, that's some clever engineering. This is very space efficient and power dense. I'm a big fan of that. That's how I like to design stuff when it's necessary. And given how small this is, that's a desirable feature. So anyway, here's our wires. The only thing I might deviate from, we've got the instructions right here. And it says to do the wires like 3.5 inches. We're going to do them a little longer than that, just in case they ever have to get redone. They're not going to be too short. Won't hurt anything. But yeah, you can see, basically cut the wires, install the terminals and heat shrink, put the bolts in or the nuts, tighten it all up. We're almost there. So, about to get this sending unit fully assembled. Okay, so we're wiring up the sending unit. I thought I'd show you guys something kind of cool. So see these nuts that thread on? See how they got those weird marks on the face? It looks like a triangle. These are called prevailing torque nuts. So I've got some on the bench here, and you'll see how some of them you see the triangle and some of them you don't. So the triangle side of this nut, I'll see if I can get it on camera, but they basically bend the thread. Yeah, you can see it there. See how the thread's kind of bent? That's on purpose. It's like a lock nut that doesn't have nylon, it's just steel. But you want the triangle part to be on this side. So that way the regular side will thread up, and then when it gets to the like flush, it'll get tight. If you do it the other way, if you put the triangle side towards the stud, it'll be really hard to start. So, and it could cross thread, so it's always better to use this side first. It'll go on a few threads, and then you'll feel it tighten and grab a wrench or a socket and run it up the rest of the way. Anyway, just thought I'd mention that. And check this out. So we got one pump wired. We're doing the other one now. So I guess the only other knock, this kit is supposed to come with heat shrink, but it was missing. That's no big deal. I got some Raychem DR25. So we got that installed. These are all crimped up. I've got some nice crimpers here. These do a really good job. These are high, you know, like I said, there's a lot of good stuff to say about this, but these crimps are heavy duty. Like, I don't know if that shows up on camera. These things are thick. Like when you crimp them, they're not soft at all. So anyway, took some good crimpers. Anyway, don't worry about it. But these do a good job of crimping, so we were doing that. We tested, they're good. And we're routing these wires. If you look, see how they kind of hug the pump? That's the intent, so that they don't get caught on anything when we're dropping them in. I may actually tie these with like a zip tie just against the pump or something, just to kind of support them. But and then we radiused right here the best we could. So overall, I'm liking that. This is looking like it'll be reliable. We're getting this side ready now. We got to get these wires going, and then we got to do the fuel socks, maybe one or two other things, and then this goes together. Alright, so we just got done doing the wiring on the inside. It turned out pretty nice. We double checked the torque on all the bolts, and you'll see we added several zip ties. So this is kind of important. I don't want anything to move around, like vibrate, possibly get chafed or cut over time. And another thing is there's a float in here. So the last thing I want is a wire to get tangled up into that and cause a problem. So you'll see here, I tied the bundle together and I made it redundant, so there's actually two ties that hold that, and then I also put a tie over here and on the other side as well. So it's just kind of like basically all three of these would have to fail before the wire even had a chance of getting over here to this float. So that's unlikely to happen. So yeah, she's wired up. Man, I gotta admit, like, look how clean this is. Very space efficient. Just the engineering is pretty much top notch. Considering the price, this is a good deal. I never realized, I think this thing was like 550 bucks or 650 bucks, which it didn't come with pumps, it's just a sending unit. But I gotta say, after putting it together, it's worth it. This is nice stuff. So yeah, she's put together. Now we gotta do the fuel filter socks, and then I think just stab this thing in there. We'll check the instructions, but I think the hard work's done. And man, I like how that looks. That's sweet. Okay, so we're gonna try this on one-handed on camera, see if it works. I haven't done this yet. Let's see if this just drops right in there. We got all our wires tucked pretty neatly. Let's see what happens. Fuel socks. There we go. Let's look at our wires. Oh, look at that. No problem. Give it a little rotation. Yeah. So make sure our O-ring's still good. It is. That's our original mark. So you can actually clock this however you want to. So we're just going to snug the bolts for now, back in the original spot. But if for some reason, like when it's in the car, like say it's bolted down and then you realize if you clock this it would be more favorable for the fittings, they actually tell you in the instructions you can do that. And so yeah, how cool is that? And yeah, these things are even labeled pump 1, pump 2, the colors. I double checked, all the wires are correct. That's our main fuel outlet. This is just an LED, which we may wire up. It's this LED, and this is the sensor for the float sensor. So there it is. Isn't that cool? Alright, we got the lid put back on. Just snug the bolts for now, but yeah, she's built. I gotta say, if I ever do another build, the only reason I didn't run this in the Miata, the pumps that are in here, they're the E5LM Bugatti pump. They're rated for E85 and gasoline, but not methanol. And I wanted to run methanol, and I did. And that's the only reason I didn't run these pumps. I actually bought one, planned to use it when I was going to build it for E85. And then when I decided to switch to methanol, I was very sad that it wouldn't work. Or at least they say it doesn't work. Maybe it does. But yeah, if you're running gas or E85, wow. I like this. So yeah, that's going to wrap this one up. If you guys got any questions, let me know, but I thought it was pretty sweet. Anyway, hope you guys enjoyed this, and until next time, y'all take it easy. Okay, bonus footage. Just so I don't forget, in case it takes a while before this gets put in the car, we went ahead and labeled that they're final installed and put a date on it. So for me, final installed means there's nothing left to do on the pumps. So what it doesn't say is the external top bolts. So when I put stuff together in a car, I mark the bolts, and these are not marked. Therefore, they're not final torqued. But everything inside that's not inspectable is, and we know that because it's labeled. Okay, that's our bonus footage. Y'all take it easy.